Team Minato truly changed the world, not as a team but each member individually, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in bad ways. So Team Minato was more or less a seed, a beginning to something far grander than itself. But that seed, much like all seeds, needed to be put into the ground. It had to suffer to change. It needed to die to be reborn. There is no better analogy for Team Minato. A single moment changed everything for the world forever. During the Third Shinobi World War, a single action set a course that was sealed with the death of a girl. Obito Uchiha went down in a blaze of glory alongside Kakashi, the shinobi who would finally come to respect the tenderhearted ninja. That casualty, along with the death of Rin, was what set the course of darkness for Obito and a path of light for Kakashi. But the odds were 50-50. If at that time Obito hadn't pushed Kakashi out of the way, what would have happened? How could things have been changed? Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. It's no hidden secret to the keen mind that Naruto likes to retell themes quite often, especially in regards to shinobi teams. It marks the never-ending cycle of violence that Naruto tries to fix with his optimistic outlook. Whether you're Team 7, the legendary Sannin, or Team Minato, a very familiar theme often finds itself playing out. A team of 3 consisting of 2 males and 1 female, the latter serving as a love interest to another. One of the males would be a bit silly and the other would be a stoic prodigy. They'd always find themselves under the tutelage of a Hokage or a soon-to-be Hokage, and one always, without fail, falls to darkness. The difference is, out of all these teams, Naruto was the only one to really be able to pull his old team back together, which seemingly broke the curse. Many times in the past, I've toyed with the concept of changing which member falls to darkness. Today will be no different, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Our story begins during the Third Shinobi World War. Minato Namikaze is the wartime Hokage and is spreading himself thin to aid in every possible way in hopes that he will somehow personally tip the scales of the war. Kakashi Hatake at this time is a Jonin, which means he is technically officially recognized as capable of leading his own team. Due to this, Minato Namikaze puts Kakashi in charge during his absence. Team Minato is assigned a mission: destroy the Kanabi Bridge. It's an important mission. Kanabi Bridge served as a supply line for the village hidden in the stones, and the loss of the bridge would severely cripple the enemy. Not too long into the mission, 2 Iwa scouts whose teammate had previously been killed by Minato would capture Rin Nohara in an effort to get information from her. This put a wedge between Kakashi and Obito. Obito believed they should rescue Rin, and Kakashi believed they should continue their mission, even if it meant sacrificing Rin. Obito and Kakashi decided to go their separate ways, but before he left, Obito mentioned Kakashi's father, who had previously died of suicide in disgrace after putting his own team above the mission, a mistake which cost them the mission. Obito mentioned to Kakashi that his father was indeed a hero, and that while it is bad to abandon one's mission, it's worse to abandon a teammate. Obito left him with those words and left to rescue Rin. After some time, Kakashi decided that Obito had been right and went back to save Rin with him. He appears just in time to save Obito from Taiseki, one of the 2 remaining Iwa scouts, but in the process takes a heavy injury to his left eye. This moment was enough, however, to force Obito to awaken his Sharingan, which he used to kill the Iwa scout. They further infiltrate the cave where Rin is being held. Kakashi and Obito push Kako to his limits and force him to retreat, but in retaliation he causes the cave to collapse on top of Team Minato. During the collapse, due to the loss of his left eye, Kakashi takes a rock to the face and it hits him in such a way that he goes down. Before Obito can get to him, the ceiling comes down. Obito and Rin barely make it out. Obito turns around and attempts to rush in to dig Kakashi back out, but when he and Rin find Kakashi, they find that he's mostly crushed. They know that there's no way that he can escape. His entire right side is crushed and he complains of his inability to see his team. Obito and Rin assure him that they're there for him. Obito is still frantically trying to dig him out, his eyes watering, and at the time it's not the dust getting in his eyes like he normally says. Kakashi informs him that more than likely he's dead. Obito refuses to accept it, but Kakashi informs him that the hidden stone ninja would be there soon. They don't have much time left. Kakashi gives him his white light chakra saber. He tells him how it was his father's, and he wants Obito to take the blade and prove that his father was right to choose his team over his mission. Obito takes it and eventually uses it to fight and kill Kako. Minato eventually comes back to save his team and helps them finish their mission to destroy Kanabi Bridge. They would eventually return to Konoha to mourn the loss of Kakashi. Meanwhile, unknown to Team Obito, Kakashi was rescued by a Zetsu and brought to Madara. For the parts of Kakashi's body that could not be saved, they were replaced with cells cultivated from Hashirama Senju. Honestly, it was a mistake. They thought it was the Sharingan-eyed boy who had been crushed, but it was actually Kakashi instead. However, Madara felt this would barely affect his plans, so he continued on. He began to help Kakashi recuperate. Kakashi was grateful for the help of Madara, but he seemed to hold little interest for the elderly man's goals. Kakashi knew that the world was cold. He had to face those harsh realities Madara told him to wake up to every day. All that was on Kakashi's mind was returning to Konoha and resuming his shinobi career. Towards the end of his rehabilitation, Kakashi was informed by White Zetsu that his team was in the middle of a battle and about to be killed. Kakashi wished to race to their side. The spiral-faced Zetsu offered to help him by encasing his body, and Kakashi accepted it. He rushed out to help his team and was surprised to see that Rin was currently impaled upon Obito's white light chakra saber. Obito in terror screams out, his Sharingan evolving into Mangekyo Sharingan immediately, causing him to pass out. Kakashi is filled with utter rage. When the strength granted to him by the Zetsu and his own implanted cells from Hashirama Senju, Kakashi unleashes strikes of wood release. He calls enough wood that he would make a natural forest blush. He single-handedly kills the entirety of the Kirinin. Kakashi finally sees what he hated the most in this world: war. War and its effects that were robbing him of those he loved. He lost his father to suicide due to what he did in the war. He lost Rin and would likely lose Obito as well if things kept up this way. Kakashi's enemy wasn't Iwagakure, nor was it Kirigakure or Konohagakure. It was the concept of war itself. But how could war ever cease to exist so long as humans with differing opinions, values, and beliefs also existed? He returns to Mountain's graveyard and asks Madara what he thinks. Madara explains his Eye of the Moon plan. He assures Kakashi that if all of them were under the subtle guidance of the infinite Tsukiyomi, that there would never be war again. It would be paradise. Madara tells Kakashi everything he would need moving forward, and lastly he offers to give him the Rinnegan. Madara then disconnects from the Geto statue that had been keeping him alive this long. In response to this, Kakashi implants a single Rinnegan into his head. He saves the final Rinnegan for a child in Amagakure. Meanwhile, Obito was in Konoha, lamenting that he was the last of Team Minato left alive. He would eventually join Anbu, where his skills he had achieved, his use of the Kamui, and various other techniques managed to make him a team captain. He was known as the most emotional of the Anbu and was known by the codename Crybaby. He didn't care so much about the name, but it reminded him of something Kakashi would call him, so he kept it. He was rather successful in his career, but it was obvious how still shook up about the death of his friends he was. The classic smile he always bore had faded and refused to come back. Minato decided that it would be best to let him guard Kushina during her pregnancy. Obito would gladly take this mission, and he would serve Kushina with zeal. He would more than guard her, he would offer to carry her bags and stuff for her. For all intents and purposes, he would basically insert himself into their little family. She would invite him over to have dinner with her and Minato. His lost smile would slowly return. He would become less a guard and more a nephew to the family. Minato wouldn't mind though. He's just glad that he managed to get Obito's mind back into a place of light. Eventually, Kushina's water would break, and it was time to have a baby. So they went through the motions according to Anbu's plan. They would get to a secret location and Obito would follow close behind. He would stand guard. It's around that time that a certain masked man would appear. However, due to lacking the Kamui ability, Kakashi would be stuck facing off against the Anbu personally. However, this only slows him down. He would eventually get in and hold the baby Naruto hostage, and most things would go the same. Kakashi would use this moment to remove the seal and take Kurama from Kushina. He would use the Rinnegan to put it into a genjutsu and would command Kurama to attack the village. Obito would be there with Kushina and baby Naruto at their home around the time that Kakashi and Minato would show up fighting. Kushina would beg Obito to help. Minato would be doing fairly well against Kakashi, however, this mysterious masked man seems to have odd abilities. He can control gravity, it seems, along with the ability to seemingly absorb chakra-based attacks. So far, these are the only abilities the being is displaying. Minato is facing off against this being and holding his own, but it's when Obito shows up that he gains the true edge. Obito uses his Kamui ability that he's been perfecting to completely pass through all of the masked man's attacks and strike him enough to cause a stagger. With this opening created, Minato comes in and strikes the masked man and manages to also sever the contract they had with Kurama. Having lost his chances of victory, Masked Kashi would flee. Minato would then command Obito to stay behind and watch over Naruto and Kushina while Minato faces off against Kurama. In an effort to protect the village from a tailed beast ball, he teleports them back to the house. Kushina fights her way out in an effort to recapture the beast and drag it down to the grave with her, but Minato doesn't allow this. Obito, however, decides that he will step in to deal with it. Minato tries to warn him against this, but Obito looks back, displaying his Mangekyo Sharingan and reminds him that he's not the same boy he had to rescue back at Kanabi Bridge. He uses his Kamui to get close enough to Kurama to make direct eye contact and manages to cast it under a Genjutsu, taking control in a similar way as how Kakashi had earlier with the Rinnegan. He commands Kurama to sit still and do nothing. He sits there with Kurama and focuses his chakra to hold his command. During this time of peace, Kushina would die, having been stripped of Kurama for too long. But then again, it was a foregone conclusion by the time they broke Kurama from the control of the masked man. Minato would lament this. He would attempt to hold it together as best he could as he cradles his son and attempts to allow Obito to concentrate. The third Hokage would come, and with the help of the others, they'd manage to quickly seal Kurama. They would seal it into Minato and Naruto respectively at his request. Despite Naruto being so young, Minato believes in his son and knows that it's best to keep the most powerful of the nine-tailed beasts split apart, just in case something like this ever happens again. After this, Obito would resume his work in Anbu. He would be approached by Danzo, who had taken a liking to Obito's abilities, especially the Kamui he had displayed. He asks Obito to join Root, but Obito declines. Something about Danzo creeps Obito out, and a part of him is screaming, "Stay clear of this freak." Obito continues to work until there are reports of disappearances from all across the village. Obito discovers Orochimaru is behind it, and the Hokage forms a sting operation. With Obito, Hiruzen, and Minato all together, along with a rather large group of Anbu, Orochimaru isn't escaping. He would likely die in this encounter, meaning no more Orochimaru and no more Hidden Sound Village. That'll have ripples in the pond later. Obito met Itachi 2 years later, and the latter was assigned to Team Ro. They worked quite a few missions together. Now, there's something interesting to note here. Due to Minato still being alive and using Obito as his right-hand man, the tensions between Konoha and the Uchiha clan aren't as grand as they'd previously been. With Shisui and Itachi all together with Obito, the coup d'etat that would normally be in the works right now would never happen. Danzo would have no grounds for which to justify the eradication of the village, meaning the village remains. After a while, Obito decides, under the recommendation of Minato, to try his hand at creating his own team. A team that would later be called Team 7. For this, he offers his son, Naruto, to join. Obito jumps at the chance, so he begins to form his team, consisting of Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura. Now, we have another note to add. Two, actually. First of all, Naruto had not had a hard life. He's lived a relatively good life, having been treated as one would expect a Hokage's son to be treated. He's received private tutors to help in becoming a well-rounded shinobi well before he even joins the academy, and this gives some alteration to Naruto's behavior. As opposed to the original version, he's a bit spoiled. He remains flippant but lacks that natural connection with those who have suffered due to having never suffered himself. He's also far stronger than he was in the original series. The second large change is Sasuke. He's no longer the strongest on the team. He is a prodigy, but he isn't as strong as the original due to possessing no hatred with which to push himself beyond his limits. This makes he and Naruto switch places on the power scale at the beginning of the series. And on a side note, Sasuke's personality will be a bit different too. Due to being exposed to Itachi's kind heart, as well as not having his own tainted by trauma and anger, he would almost be happy-go-lucky. Should I whisper that? Would have been a better character this way. He would also be kind and almost pacifistic. Sakura would not have developed as great a crush on him as before due to his lack of brooding and darkness, although it's not to say she doesn't still have a crush. She just doesn't have as great of one, and she doesn't have much competition. She also seems to have a bit of a crush on Naruto to a degree at this point, which would even out their relationship a little bit. Obito would see much of his old team in them. This gives him a little fear, but Minato assures him that he will make a better teacher than the Hokage himself had. Minato recreates the bell test, and Naruto remains as headstrong as before, and overconfident in his own abilities. He would still find himself unable to even touch Obito, literally. Naruto would have no clue what was happening. Sasuke could see it with his Sharingan and tell Naruto about it. He would mention that Naruto seriously passed clean through Obito. Naruto would curse and ask how they're supposed to fight a ghost. Sakura would mention that he can't always be intangible. There are points in time when he is tangible, meaning that they will need to distract him and then try to get him to touch or strike one of them. That is when they'll know he's tangible and can touch the bells. All three work together and attempt to do their plan. They would work at it all day, and eventually they would get close enough that Naruto actually got Obito to grab his wrist. This means that Sasuke had the chance to reach out and grab the bells, but Obito would notice this and activate Kamui again. In the end, they would fail to get the bells, but Obito would be overjoyed with their level of teamwork. He would pass them and welcome them all to his team. They would begin their work as shinobi. The first mission of note would be the mission to the Land of Waves. Much like originally, they would be attacked by the Demon Brothers. Naruto would go into action and save Sasuke, who would be shocked by it. Naruto would snap at Sasuke that he is an Uchiha, which means keeping both eyes open. Sasuke would nod and wipe a couple tears from his eyes from the shock of everything. Obito would sigh and then smile. He sees a lot of himself in Sasuke, so he offers Sasuke something from his own past. He hands over a set of old goggles to wear. He looks at Sasuke and says, "These will help you out when you get more of that pesky dust in your eyes." Sasuke gladly accepts the gift from his sensei. Sakura kind of finds the whole moment endearing and blushes. They continue on. They would be attacked by Zabuza, but due to Obito's signature Kamui ability, he manages to get through his defenses and strike him. I won't lie, this ability is really overpowered. Everything happens pretty much the same as the original arc, but Obito manages to come out smelling even more like roses than Kakashi did. He doesn't suffer from the chakra draining effects of using his Sharingan since, well, it's his Sharingan and he's been using it for as long as he had them. There'd be no need for him to rest. However, this doesn't mean that he doesn't still make them train. He focuses mainly on Sasuke though. Naruto already knows how to control the chakra at the bottom of his feet. It was a prerequisite to becoming a Jinchuriki like his father and living in the Hokage's residence. Complete chakra control. Sakura hadn't known it before, but she masters it as fast as you would imagine. Sasuke had a bit of a harder time doing it. However, unlike in the original series, he isn't adding too much chakra, he's adding too little. Remember, Sasuke isn't as aggressive in this AU due to having no hatred in his heart. But Obito takes the time to personally teach Sasuke since he reminds him of himself. Sasuke works himself to the bone. Obito even asks him to stop after a while, but Sasuke says he doesn't want to drag anyone down and wishes to master this as quickly as possible. Obito respects this and continues to stay with him while he works on it. With Obito's guidance, Sasuke manages to perfect it, but the constant training leaves him exhausted, and so Obito decides to let him sleep as they go to protect the bridge under construction. Obito suspects Zabuza survived. They go, and nothing much happens until Zabuza and Haku appear. Sasuke would foil a kidnapping of Inari and his mother before catching up with everyone else. Sasuke would find Naruto in the demonic ice crystal's dome and would jump in with him. Naruto would ask why Sasuke would willingly throw himself into a trap, and Sasuke would say it's because he didn't want Naruto to be in there alone. Naruto would curse at how this AU Sasuke is such an innocent, small bean, and he would tell him that he could use his Sharingan to try and track where the real Haku is. Sasuke attempts this, but isn't having as much success, especially with Haku's Senbon coming in at every angle. Sasuke apologizes that he can't see the real Haku. Naruto says it's because he has those stupid goggles on his face. Haku throws more Senbon, and Sasuke would sacrifice himself to protect Naruto, seemingly dying in the process. Naruto would hold Sasuke and scream at him that he should have stayed out, tears flowing as he shouted at his friend. He looks up at Haku, and in that moment, Haku knows he just screwed up big time. Naruto makes a solemn vow to murder Haku the same way he killed Sasuke, and Haku sees this vow being sealed with the crimson aura of the Nine Tails. Naruto unleashes his tailed beast cloak and manages to break through by smashing the mirrors. He would do just as he did before. He would not stop, however, when Haku's mask shatters. He would shamelessly eviscerate Haku. All the while, Sasuke is in the caring arms of Sakura, who cries over the loss of Sasuke. Obito would finish off Zabuza with his white light chakra saber. Team Sen would then be caught in a fight with Gato and his men. Obito attempts to defend his team and fight them. Due to his use of Kamui, he can keep himself protected from the strikes he can't deflect. He, of course, can't deflect them all, and doesn't have the chakra reserves to keep it up all the time. So he does take quite a few strikes, but in the end he manages to fend them off. He then collapses due to blood loss, and both he and the still living Sasuke are admitted to the nearby hospital. The bridge is then named the Ghost Blade Bridge to commemorate the legendary feats accomplished during its creation. They would eventually return to Konoha, and the Hokage along with Obito make the decision that Team 7 is worthy to try to become chunin, so they allow them to enter the chunin exams. Most everything happens the same as it would before, however Rock Lee would challenge Naruto instead of Sasuke, and Naruto would at least answer a few questions on his test correctly, and Orochimaru does not attempt to take Sasuke's body because, well, he's dead. This would mean that Gaara and his siblings would show up in the chunin exams under true pretenses. Team 7 would easily get the second scroll with no issues. Then comes the exhibition matches. The matches go basically the same as before, though Naruto has a good bit of an easier time than normal. They then get the month-long time to train like before, and Naruto trains with Jiraiya under Minato's wishes, where Naruto would learn how to better control his tailed beast powers and learns to form a Rasengan, which he had previously had issues with due to how Minato had little time to personally teach it to him. Meanwhile, Obito would train Sasuke. He would show him an old technique that Obito learned from his old friend Kakashi. He would teach Sasuke the Chidori. After their training, they would convene for the finals. The matches would go mostly the same. Naruto would beat Neji, and with his training, Sasuke would beat Gaara. Shino would beat Kankuro, and Temari would beat Shikamaru. The battle would come down to Naruto and Sasuke, and Naruto is heavily impressed by how Sasuke's grown since they last met. Sasuke gives Naruto a run for his money with his Sharingan, but Naruto breaks into his tailed beast cloak, and this gives him the edge which allows him to defeat Sasuke. Then comes that battle between Shino and Temari. While Temari proves she is resourceful, she loses to Shino. Then Shino needs to face off against Naruto, but Naruto proves he is more than a match for him and proceeds to win. With the finals over, Minato claps with pride that his son has become the strongest genin, and can see the Hokage in the making. Obito would share in that pride himself, as he helped to teach him. Sasuke is proud and claps for Naruto, as would Sakura. All of Team 7 ascends to chunin, which means they're capable of higher difficulty missions, far closer to what the Land of Waves fiasco evolved into. 2.5 later, Gaara would be kidnapped and his tailed beast stripped from him. Minato is informed immediately. Slowly, more Jinchuriki are being kidnapped and tailed beasts being taken, and the same word continues to appear throughout all of the reports. Akatsuki. Daybreak. Intel is beginning to be built up on the Akatsuki. Meanwhile, Team 7 is having a reunion. Sakura and Naruto show up for a bell test with Obito. Naruto asks where Sasuke is, and Obito says that Sasuke is home taking care of his brother. He breaks the news to his team that his old friend appears to have a terminal illness, and the stress is eating away at Sasuke. Naruto and Sakura feel sorry for this. They do the bell test with Obito and just barely miss getting it. Eventually, they do go to visit Sasuke. Itachi is inside resting, and Sasuke is waiting outside. Naruto asks how Sasuke is, and Sasuke just shrugs and keeps looking down. The doctors don't know what's causing it or how to fix it. Sakura sits down and hugs Sasuke, telling him that it'll be alright. All the while this is going down, the Hidden Leaf is attempting to hunt down the Akatsuki, but they're having a lot of problems with it. Jiraiya has perished in Amagakure attempting to track down the leader of the group. Naruto doesn't take this well. However, a frog from Mount Myoboku comes and asks if Jiraiya's student, Naruto, can go and train. Minato agrees, and Naruto goes off to Mount Myoboku. But while he's away, Pain sets his sights on Konoha. It isn't long until a man bearing a single Rinnegan appears in the air, calling himself Pain. Minato believes this man to be the same who attacked the village hidden in the leaves all those years back and killed Kushina. Minato begins to fight. The village is under attack by Pain and his 6 paths. Despite his illness, Itachi stands and dons his armor to fight. He would be aiding Sasuke in battle. Sasuke would look back and ask him what he's doing, and Itachi would tell him that he can't lay around while his village, and more importantly, little brother, need him. Naruto would return at around this time to help his father fight, but Pain and his paths would team up on Naruto to remove his tailed beast. Even with all this power, Naruto still falls. Konoha is decimated, but its villagers are safe. Naruto is dying and his father finds him. He cries out to Naruto not to die, but Naruto is starting to slip. Minato can't stand to watch Naruto die the same way as Kushina, so he makes the fateful decision to seal his own half of Kurama into Naruto, sacrificing his own life to save his son's. Minato says that it's okay and his time is over. It's time to pass on the Wheel of Fire to the next generation. With that, Minato dies, and due to overworking himself, Itachi also dies. This causes Sasuke to cry out and awaken his Mangekyo Sharingan. In the aftermath of this, the third Hokage, Hiruzen, would come out of retirement and become Hokage once more. During this time, Sasuke's father, Fugaku, tells Sasuke to implant Itachi's eyes into his own head. Sasuke bucks against this command, as it almost makes his father seem like he doesn't care about defiling Itachi's body. Fugaku tries to explain this to him, but in the end, Naruto is the one to convince Sasuke, telling him that Itachi died to protect Sasuke, and if he could aid him even after his death, he would be tickled pink. He says that the best way to respect who Itachi was would be to accept the gift of his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Sasuke finally accepts and has them implanted into his head. Later, Hiruzen calls a 5 Kage summit in hopes of dealing with the threat of the Akatsuki. During this time, Kakashi would show up and demand they turn over the 8 Tails and his Jinchuriki, Killer B. While they refuse, Kakashi declares the 4th Shinobi World War. Meanwhile, Killer B is killed by Kisame Hoshigaki. Killer B and his brother A, the Raikage, manage to defeat him. Killer Bee takes the blade Samehada as a trophy and proceeds to go into hiding on an island. Team 7 would eventually meet up with him here, and Killer Bee would help Naruto learn how to tap into Kurama's reserves and activate the Kurama Chakra mode. However, Samehada awakens as Kisame Hoshigaki Reborn. He manages to take some of the 8 Tails chakra, enough to wake the 10 Tails. Realizing what's happened, Naruto and Killer Bee rush to the battlefront to tell this to the 3rd Hokage. I could see Kakashi at this time pulling all the Akatsuki together and his army of Zetsu to a final place to defend him while he awakens the 10 Tails. The allied shinobi forces would arrive to the place of the final battle, and they would begin to fight their way to Kakashi. Obito would recognize that the masked man from years ago was here with Pain. Naruto and Sasuke would go after Pain, assuming that he's the boss here, hoping he is because they crave to avenge their family members. But Obito knows better. Obito knows that the masked man is the one who's in charge. He attacks him as the Geto statue begins to move. Using Kamui, he would manage to get close enough to strike him, and the strike would remove the mask and show who the masked man was. It was his old friend from all those years ago, Kakashi Hatake. Obito would ask what the heck is going on, and Kakashi would explain how he survived. Obito would ask why Kakashi was doing this, and Kakashi would explain that he was there the day that Obito killed Rin, and would tell him that his goal was to end war. Obito would exclaim, "You're going to end war by starting one? Are you crazy?" And Kakashi would respond, "I will ensure that the 4th Shinobi World War is the last war." Meanwhile, Sasuke and Naruto are attempting to face off against Pain. He calls his 6 paths to aid him in battle, but Naruto isn't the same as he was before. He manages to destroy a few of them. This doesn't mean much since Pain has access to the King of Hell, which would allow him to revive any of his paths anytime they are defeated. Sasuke asks him how they're going to beat an immortal being, and Naruto would think. Gripping one of the odd piercings one of the 6 paths had in their face, Naruto would realize that there was a 7th being, an outer path. Naruto would tell Sasuke exactly where the being was, and it was located somewhere beneath the statue. Sasuke would look back and exclaim that it's already moving. How is he supposed to beat that? Naruto would tell him to choose. Fight the 6 paths or find the single person attached to the statue. Sasuke would choose the statue. He would arrive and find a being attached to it, Nagato. The statue would attempt to protect Nagato, but so long as Sasuke can see him, Nagato can die. Sasuke has Amaterasu. He uses it to kill Nagato, and when Nagato dies, so do the 6 paths. Meanwhile, Obito attempts to finish off Kakashi, but he fails and Kakashi flees. Obito looks back and sees the path of destruction that the Geto statue is causing. He tries to behead it with Kamui, but before he can, it's absorbed by Kakashi, who becomes the 10 Tails Shinchuriki. Most of the entire allied shinobi forces would perish attempting to fight him, and this includes Hiruzen. Danzo is there and he offers far better resistance with his Izanagi, but even he can't stand against the 10 Tails Shinchuriki. As soon as he runs out of Sharingan, his Izanagi is ended and Kakashi kills him as well. Sasuke comes in with his Chidori to strike Kakashi, but he finds that all he can do is poke him with his hand. Kakashi has absorbed the technique. Obito attempts to do the same at the same time, but he finds his attack nulled as well. However, Naruto's Rasengan hit its mark. Obito attempts to figure out how this happened, and realizes that Sage Jutsu works. It somehow is not absorbed by Kakashi, so he informs Naruto of this. Naruto continues to hit Kakashi with this until he breaks through his defenses and manages to pull the tailed beasts free from him. With the help of the allied shinobi forces, Naruto manages to pull the tailed beasts free, defeating Kakashi. Before he can do anything to strike back, Obito buries the white light chakra saber into Kakashi's chest and kills him with tears in his eyes. And with this, the 4th Shinobi World War has come to a close. When everything comes to a close, the tailed beasts are freed and allowed to go their own way. Obito becomes the 6th Hokage, just as he always dreamed, but he inherits a lot of issues and needs to rebuild the village hidden in the leaf. But he feels like he's ready to do so as long as he has Team Obito with him. With that, peace returns to the villages. So, what'd you think? Did you enjoy this little what if? Turns out I could see a lot of things changing, with Obito being the one to survive. But at the same time, a lot of things stay the same as well. As much as I love Obito though, I'm glad Kakashi was the one to avoid getting crushed. After all, Obito may have lost his way, but he made the most badass villain when he was Madara, and he was hilarious when he was hanging around with Deidara. And his history was just perfect. It's hard to create the same impact with Kakashi. What about you? What do you think about this AU? Do you see things playing out differently, or do you think the conclusions we reached here would be the way events would play out? I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us what you think. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And feel free to ring the bell if you like this video and you want to be notified when we drop more. We try to drop one every day, so I'm sure you'll find plenty that you like. Anyway, peace out, friends.